Starmer the Chamelon. Kier Starmer is a political chameleon. He will go wherever he thinks best serves his own interests and the interests of those who are kind of on his side, on his team, in his political belief. Kier Starmer, for the longest time, pitched himself as a man who represented the oppressed, the working class, and was all about making Britain better. Because for 15 years, we had disgusting austerity and Tory leadership which destroyed this country. And Kier Starmer basically positioned himself in the run into the election being like, I will not be the Tories, and he turns out to be the Tories because his version of Labour is even more right-wing than Tony Blair's New Labour. In my opinion, in my analysis, they are just pure neoliberals who have basically tarnished the name of the Labour Party. Since they got ousted Jeremy Corbyn, and Starmer was a big part of reinforcing these lies about Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party has become a neoliberal party, once again, as it was under Tony Blair, and has completely decimated any trust a lot of the working class have in Labour, which is why we have sections of the working class going over to the Reform Party, which is devastating, because imagine being so bad at representing the working class, you push the working class into the arms of a party that clearly does not have the working class's best interests at heart. But let's go more into why and examples of Kier Starmer being a chameleon. So this video came about after the Supreme Court ruling about trans women and gender being basically about biological sex. And Kier Starmer came out and decided, hey, you know what? This is great. Trans women aren't women. He came out and basically said, this is giving clarity to the situation. Well, it really hasn't. It's made things harder and worse. It's made lives harder for trans women. It's given the likes of disgusting human being J.K. Rowling an even bigger platform, made her smug, and is frankly just the first step to these right-wing think tanks funded by the likes of J.K. Rowling and her friends. It's given them a foothold in making more political decisions. Obviously, people will say, the government aren't the Supreme Court. It's not the same thing. And I get the government aren't the Supreme Court, even though they are still a branch of governance in the UK. But Kier Starmer's absolute just, okay, whatever, the Supreme Court are completely right. Trans women aren't women, trans women, whatever, go to the men's bathroom, which clearly is going to be very harmful for trans women. And it's opened the floodgates to there being more discriminatory policies against trans people. And obviously, the Starmerites will say, well, no, trans people are still protected. But if you look at the wording and you look at the way the Labour politicians are reacting to it, even West Streeting, I believe, as of the day of me recording this, basically said anyone who said trans women are women in the UK party should have some humility. And it's like, well, this is going to open the floodgates for people to find a loophole to discriminate against trans women. And they'll say, no, they're still a protected class. It doesn't matter. They're going to find a way to do it. And they're going to use this ruling as a way to do that. And Kier Starmer's absolute just like, we need to cool the temperature, which means nothing. It means nothing. He's like, oh, calm down, everyone, calm down, is what he's telling trans people when they are actively going to be hurt by this. And I was making a point earlier, this is going to open the floodgates to more and more repressive ideas, more and more repressive policies being lobbied for by parties, and by parties I mean groups of individuals who want more aggressive policies against other, minority groups, whether they be ethnic minorities, whether they be other parts of the LGBTQ plus community, and even women themselves will suffer because of these groups. Because TERFs don't really care about women. They care about getting their points across. The TERFs are the ones that are also pushing this, like, migrants are evil, migrants are bad, they're bad towards women, The TERFs are the ones pushing the like very racist stereotype that oftentimes black women aren't actually women. We need to start doing like invasive tests on black women because of their body structure and stuff. And Kier Starmer has just completely capitulated to them because he thinks in his mind this is what's going to get him the most power, the most votes, because him and the current Labour leadership all believe no one's going to vote for the Tories anyway. You know, everyone, 15 years the Tories suck, they're just not going to vote for them. They're going to default back to Labour. When Labour lost votes compared to when they were under Jeremy Corbyn, and they saw big growth in Reform and the Greens, who got similar, votes and the same number of seats as Reform, they lost ground to both sides, and they will continue to do so doing stuff like this. And Labour's thing is, well, if we appeal to the Reform voters, doing things like this, because many Reform voters are reactionaries, if we appeal to the Reform voters, everyone who went off to Green will just come back to Labour anyway. The blue Labourites, so the Tories who voted Labour, they're going to stick with Labour anyway. And they won't. They'll go back to Tory, they'll go to Reform, or they just won't vote. And so he's going to lose the next election, and things like this capitulation to the anti-trans narrative, which is going to lead to more and more harmful stuff against minority groups who historically voted Labour, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ plus groups, historically voted Labour. He is going to lose all of those votes, and maybe he'll pick up a couple of votes from J.K. Rowling and her mates, but not really. And his capitulation here shows how weak, how much of a lack of a backbone he has, and the entire Labour governance has, because they're all basically towing this line that Starmer set, because he thinks being anti-trans is in vogue because they're doing it in the United States at the moment. Let's talk about the two-child benefits cap. This was actually a article from The Guardian 3 days ago as of me recording, 4 days as of this video going out, I believe. So, Starmer basically continually berated the Conservative Party when it came to the two-child benefit cap. He always kept saying the children are being treated worse. There are so many children in poverty under the Tories. There are so many children going to food banks. He gets into power and he decides, oh wait, you know what? That two-child benefit cap, we're keeping that. Even though statistically it would help so many people in Labour majority districts. Their excuse of there's not enough money. Well, that there was no money. We all knew there was no money. The point is, the austerity didn't help. We had no money when the Tories implemented the harsh austerity, which led to thousands of deaths. And guess what? The harsh austerity didn't improve the deficit. It didn't improve anything. And so you deciding to do austerity again, you deciding to allow children go into poverty, to allow children to struggle, to allow families to struggle, as the cost of living is increasing, which again, I know started because of the Tories and in conjunction with COVID, which was also handled terribly by the Tories. But you know that, and you know that, depriving, families of the money that they need to survive by not thinking about increasing taxes on corporations, introducing a new higher rate of tax. Not doing those things is meaning you're not going to get rid of something that will materially benefit the working class, will benefit people who need the money. And giving them that money will actually stimulate your economy because they will have the money to spend on helping their children, which will help the local economies as well. And you are seeing the Labour Party structure really pushing to not scrap the two-child benefit cap. I mean, Here, this article from The Guardian, ministers privately ruling out scrapping two-child benefit cap. Something that will materially benefit people of the working class who, again, historically voted Labour, and pushing them into the arms of reform because they are telling them, we're not going to help you. And so reform will be like, well, we might help you, and here's a false reason as to why, you have your problems. So it's just, they think the working class, or people who shifted to reform or shifted to the Greens, will just inevitably just come back to Labour. Whatever, they don't care. They're not going to change their minds. They'll come back to Labour anyway. And they think the Tories that they picked up, they're just going to stick with Labour, and they're not. And it's all because he thinks he has the power inevitably to win it, and also because the stakeholders in the current Labour setup are very similar to the ones that were supporting the Tories, and they'd much rather give the money to business as opposed to giving it to the people. I'll be honest, this photo is also because he looks a little bit funny, but this is him, as human rights lawyer, head of this. This was before he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, but his lack of care about humanitarian law is just another reason he's a political comedian. Obviously, whilst he was in the opposition, he was very pro-Israel. He introduced people to the party who were very pro-Israel. Labour friends of Israel have great influence over him compared to Jeremy Corbyn, which, again, is pretty funny because in the US, politicians sell out for millions of dollars. Here, they sell out for like a trip to Butlins. But it just shows he has seen that human rights be damned. He can get the most bang for his buck by supporting Israel. He can, benefit the most materially. I'm sure he has investments in Israeli companies. I'm sure Israeli companies have approached him, or US companies have approached him, but they're interchangeable, and been like, hey, you be pro-Israel. Once this prime minister thing is done, do you want to be on the board of our company? You'll get like a cushy Nick Clegg job when he went to Facebook, or you'll get a cushy speeches thing that Tony Blair did, or get to work for a think tank like George Osborne, and he's probably future-proofing. Am I saying he knows he's going to lose in 4 years' time? I don't know. Maybe he does know that. Maybe he truly believes, like I've been saying, that people will just inevitably vote Labour regardless. And he thinks, I'll get another 5 years as Prime Minister, so 10 years as PM, and then afterwards I can go off and do these cushy jobs that the Israel lobby has been offering me, that the United States has been offering me on behalf of their colony Israel. And, human rights be damned, I'm going to do that. And that's kind of what it comes across as. So much so that the likes of David Lammy, who is the Foreign Secretary, who more outwardly than Starmer was pro-Palestine, was pro-Palestinian liberation. He saw the writing on the wall being like, I can make so much money off of being pro-Israel because the US pumps money into doing their bribery for them, that even David Lammy's turned. So I'm not surprised that Starmer is pro-genocide, because he's going to make money. And if David Lammy is going to do it, of course Kier Starmer's going to. And I want to finish off on Labour's promises to the disabled community, because they said they're going to have policies developed with and by disabled people. They're going to scrap the Tories' dehumanising disability assessments, make the benefit system fair, support for those who want to work, make all education accessible, treat hate crime seriously, make career allowance equal to job seekers allowance, carers allowance. And what they've done is, or at least what they've openly said is, we're going to cut disability payments for loads of disabled people. I believe, as of recording, the last thing I noticed was at least 2 million people were getting their disability payments cut. And it's like, just defeats the entire purpose of this entire slide. Because even if you come out and say, it's because we're making the benefit system fair, how? How are you making it fair? All you've done is cut funding for people who need it. You know, you're saying the Tories have a dehumanizing disability assessment. Well, considering these people were considered, to actually be getting these payments under the dehumanizing system, which I agree, the way the Tories went about it was extremely dehumanizing. It made disabled people feel horrible about themselves. It really questioned disabled people, like, very mentally taxingly. But you're saying that these people who, even though they got through a dehumanizing assessment, even though the Tories, despite their reservations about giving people disability payments, you as Labour think, actually, no, the Tories were wrong to give you disability payments. The Tories weren't harsh enough on disabled people, as it's turned out to be in the end. And again, Starmer probably is seeing this as, I don't think there's enough disabled people out there who is going to clearly sway the next election. Or we're doing it so early into our run as the government that they won't remember in 4 years' time when the next election is. Because he's not going to call a snap election unless it's something like horrible happens to the Tories and Reform. So it's infuriating because he knew this would get him votes. This was his chameleon thing. He knew this sort of rhetoric would get him votes. And frankly, all the things here, probably very, very good policy. Policy that is very pro the disabled community and helps them. But in actuality, he's not implementing these things. He's not doing these things for disabled people. He got their votes, he got what they wanted from them, and now he's going to make cuts because he wants to say, look how I improved the economy, how I got the deficit down. I did more austerity and it actually worked. And it's not going to work. It's clear it's never going to work because austerity just doesn't work. It just makes lives and living in the country worse. We know that. We saw that for nearly 20 goddamn years. Most of my lifetime, we saw that. Over half my lifetime, we saw that. And he's just going to continue implementing austerity. Disabled people are going to suffer. And then they'll come back and say, look at all we promised. And they will find some way of finagling it to look like they hit all of these points. When in actuality, all they've done is dehumanize disabled people further, just like the Tories. So there you go. That is Kier Starmer, the chameleon of the United Kingdom, a man who will change his spots whenever it suits him. When it suits him, he is pro-LGBTQ+. When it doesn't suit him, he throws them to the side. When it suits him, he'll tell disabled people he wants to help them, will implement policies that helps them. But when he's got their votes, when he's in power, he's decided to dehumanize them, just like the Tories. He refers to himself as a former human rights lawyer, but when push comes to shove and when he can make a little bit of money off the United States, he's decided to be anti-human rights. When he wants the working class to vote for them, he tells them, I'm going to help you and your children get out of poverty. When he's in power, he's decided, actually, I'm going to do more austerity. Your children can suffer. It's fine. I'm not going to feel it, but you will. And it truly just shows how far Labour has fallen. As someone who supported Jeremy Corbyn, because I saw his policies were the antithesis of everything Labour are doing right now. And just to see where Labour are, the complete opposite of Labour under the likes of Corbyn and Wilson. Can you imagine being more right-wing than Tony Blair and calling yourself the Labour leader? Jeez. Ugh.